Well, I'm Jordan. I'm the Elon student who's going to be coordinating the interview today. I'm a rising junior, and I'm also first generation, so that's kind of exciting.
Cool.
So the story told in your novel about a first-generation Latina student is a story that will touch many of the students at Elon and will inspire other students' perspectives on issues such as immigration, cultural differences, access, and many other central themes, one being the concept of home. So your novel explores home in a way that is likely to resonate with our first-year students. That being said, what is it that we want from home, and why do we go away from it?
Oh man, that's a deep question. What is it that we want from home, and why do we go away from it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I think it took me the whole book to answer that question, right? To write it all out. I can only speak for myself, right? But at the same time, my sense is that what do we want from home? I think ultimately, home is a place where you should feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a place that you should feel that you can be yourself without any sort of sense of performing who you are, right?
Right.
Home is the place where you feel the most at ease, or should be. And that's why not everybody's home is their family, right? That might not be the place where you feel most at ease. For me, the reason I still think of Miami as home is because it's the place that when I get there, I know it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never emotionally or literally lost. Like I always know that the people I'm interacting with, if they're also from Miami, have a very similar, probably like their prom was probably a lot like my prom. Their high school experience was likely very similar to mine. So there's a sort of a common culture underneath us that I can make certain assumptions about that person that make me feel comfortable. Like I know that there are behaviors that I can do that won't offend in Miami, but here in Nebraska, they do. A really small example, the way you greet somebody for me when I go home to Miami is you give them a kiss on the cheek. If I were to do that here, I'd get arrested for sexual harassment. I'd be sexually harassing everyone by accident, right? So why do we leave home? I think that's in order to see it more starkly. I have lots of friends that never left Miami because they're like, it's perfect. Why would I leave? And I just feel like, I wonder, like, how do you know for sure? Like, how do you know you may have been born in a certain place, but that's an accident of history. You didn't have any control over that. I have just as many friends that have moved somewhere and been like, oh, this is where I was sort of meant to be. This new place is home. And there's people that move to Miami and they're like, oh, this is home. Yeah. So part of why you leave is to test it out. And also to put yourself in an uncomfortable place for a little while that you can still learn and grow from.
Right.
So I feel home at a lot of different places. I still feel at home when I go back to my college campus where I went to college. Like that place feels like home in a lot of ways because I learned and grew so much in those 4 years that place will always feel like home. Even as new buildings spring up when I come back, I'm like, hey, put that building there. It's fine. It becomes part of the landscape of my imagination's home very quickly. Right.
Yeah, so kind of going off of that, do you think that your journey away from home is somehow kind of essential to your identity formation?
I think for me it was. I think for a lot of people it is, though. I know I used to work as a college access counselor, and I always really strongly encouraged the students that I worked with to leave California because this was in Los Angeles. And I'd be like, look, you always come back. This will always be here. This will always be home turf. So why not try out going somewhere else, seeing how another part of the country or the planet is, and then bringing that knowledge back that makes you a more like robust human being.
Yeah.
It's important to leave your comfort zone. I mean, I recently had a piece in a newspaper about going up to a ranch in Burwell, Nebraska, which is, at least where I live in Nebraska, is a very urban part of Nebraska. But I was like, well, what's the rural part? So much of the state is like empty. I mean, I guess it's full of cows, but so much of the state is like not full of people. I was like, well, I want to see that part of it. And I know I was able to go there and be like, okay, I have a slightly better understanding of what life might be here. And I also know it's like not for me, but it also showed me, I think sometimes we live in bubbles where we're like, oh, everybody thinks the way I do, and everybody will agree with me on a certain topic. And you don't realize till you leave that, no, that is actually can sometimes be a really controversial question. whatever it is you're thinking about. So again, for instance, the idea of like, oh, everybody's comfortable with being kissed on the cheek as a form of greeting. That's not true. I would have never known that if I'd never left Miami. So now I can be a more compassionate and empathetic person. When I encounter somebody who doesn't like that, I don't think, oh, that person's rude. I just think, oh, that person's not from where I'm from. And we have different ideas of what constitutes a proper greeting.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. So you touched on a piece about vulnerability during your last answer. So the protagonist of your novel is that she experiences a really drastic shift in her surroundings and her level of comfort when she leaves her hometown of Miami to attend Rawlings. And one of the major components of this shift is her sense of vulnerability in being a first-generation minority student at a predominantly white institution with a really skewed affluent demographic. So seeing Lizette, as well as yourself, overcome that sense of vulnerability is really inspiring and instills a very powerful message to the readers of your novel. So could you expand on what this kind of exposure was like for Lizette and compare and contrast it a little bit to how your feelings have shaped your experience as an author?
Well, that's a big question. But I have one small caveat about it, which is that I don't know that she overcomes it. And I don't know that I've overcome it. I think the word that I would use is how you navigate it, right? I don't think the fact that I'm a first generation college student impacts my life every day. And I know that sounds like a weird statement, but I always feel like I trick someone into letting me into a college, which then percolates up into everything else in my life, right? And so it's something I have to still fight against on an almost daily basis. I probably in large part because now I am a professor at a school, and I'm like, how did this happen? Like every day I'll wake up and be like, what? Like I shouldn't be here. I don't know how I did this. How did I do this? So I think that feeling never goes away. And I think that's something that's very particular to the first generation college student experience. And it's something that when I was a counselor, I didn't lie about. I was like, this feeling doesn't necessarily go away. You just learn to look at it in a different way. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. The fact that you can do this and nobody else necessarily has, it means there's something very like special about you that allows you to overcome sort of an additional hurdle, but also that you have a different set of skills that students whose parents have gone to college don't necessarily have. Like you did it on your own maybe, or you maybe you're like good at research and independent research, which are the kind of skills that would actually make you really good at grad school. And that's a little different from a family that maybe had a lot of like a handle in the process of applying to college. Like I know I had friends in college whose mothers did most of the work for them and would get on them about writing your essay. You have to write your essay. And I was like, I never had that problem. I was like, I really want this. Why wouldn't I write my essay? So that idea of being like motivated is, it's a tool in your toolbox when you're a first generation college student. So you learn to reframe things that sometimes outside messages are telling you, oh, this is a weakness. And you're like, no, actually it's a strength. It's something important that I bring to my campus. I think you asked the question of sort of like, how do I bring that experience to bear on myself as an author? Yes. Right. Oh man, it's even worse, I think. I mean, publishing is a predominantly white industry. I think it's pretty clear that writing by women, and especially women of color, isn't taken as seriously. I know I get questions when I give readings that are like out of nowhere that I couldn't imagine a man getting, or especially a white man. Oftentimes when I'm giving readings, a reader will like, in a question, be like, so when you were a science major? And I was like, no, that's the character, it's not me. So, white male writers get afforded that respect. It's like, oh yeah, you have an imagination and you made this up. Whereas because I share some demographic similarities with my narrator, well, of course she has to be me. But I think one thing I definitely bring into my work as a writer that I took from being a first generation college student is a sense of fearlessness. And a sense of like, I didn't know how that was gonna pan out in college. Like I was like, well, I'm gonna go far away and maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't, maybe I'll stay there, maybe I won't, but I'm gonna try it out. And if I hate it, I'll come back. Like I can always come back. And that sense of constant revision or being open to a version of revision in my own life, that translates to being a writer. Like right now I'm working on a novel that I'm like, this could be a total failure. This could be a book that makes no sense. And that's okay. I'm enjoying it and I'm learning from writing it. So, okay, what do I have to lose? I think there's a little bit of that is translated over to my experience as a writer for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's definitely a learning experience always. But that being said, what does your writing process typically look like, especially when you write an essay or a novel, when you have received a particular request or assignment from an editor to address a specific topic? Like, how do you make sure that your own voice is still heard through that assignment and through the kind of mask of having to be an author?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it matters a lot who your editor is and that they're editing you well, so they're not trying to take out the things that make you on the page. And I'm really lucky that the majority of the people that I work with, they have found me because they like something about my voice and they want to make the best use of it. So a good editor goes a long way towards helping that happen. I think I say no to things that I can already sort of see the subtext. But I'm trying to think, like in college, you can't say no to like a paper. You can't be like, no, professor, like no on this. But again, that sort of same sense of fearlessness that has to go into it. Like, well, what I have to say is important, and it needs to be said, and so I'm going to say it, and then that opens a conversation. So being open to a back and forth, to criticism, and that's one of the great things about going to small liberal arts college is that that's encouraged. It's not, and I can tell you, like I teach, like on my kids' building, I teach at a big school, and the level of feedback that we have time that's built into the way we teach is not the same as where I went to college, where I would get my paper back and it was like the professor had written another paper on top of my paper. And is being open to that sort of feedback is part of what made me a stronger writer. And so I still am open to that. But I think when I was first learning what I wanted to do as a creative writer, I just read so widely, and I would be like, okay, what do I love reading, and who are the voices that compel me? And then for, maybe a few months at a time, all my work was just imitating that person. Like there's a writer named Edward P. Jones that I just wrote versions of Edward P. Jones stories for a good year, but why not? He's awesome. So I would try to sound like him and fail, but the failure was mine. And that's what I sounded like. Well, I kind of want to use more M dashes than he does. And so I did. And then the result is the books and the stories and the writing that you see. But you asked a little bit about my writing process too. And I want to tell you that as a cautionary tale, especially to new freshmen, like I procrastinate, I wait till the last minute, and then it's horrible. I get like a rash from being stressed out. Like, don't be like me, basically. Don't be like me. The best pieces are the ones where I lie to myself about the deadline and I write them. And then I have time to read them over and revise. It's always a horrible sign when I would turn something in and it was still warm from the printer. Like, not good. You want to avoid warm paper when you turn. And we know, now that I'm on the other side as a professor, when a student turns in a story or a paper and it's hot, I'm like, come on. Like, you'd be surprised how many things you catch just reading it over once on hard copy before you turn it in. So now my process involves lying to myself a lot and being like, okay, this piece, they want it by Friday, so I'm going to say Wednesday. And so I'll have a draft, a terrible draft by Wednesday, and then I'll work on it some more, and then I print it out Thursday and read it over again. And then the change between what happens Thursday and then turning it in Friday is phenomenal, just because ideas have more time to sit and the ideas find their form in the sentences. So giving yourself that time. So yeah, I just pretend it's due sooner than it really is. And that's one way I get away with writing better pieces ultimately.
That's what you got to do sometimes. Sometimes you just got to think it till you make it. All right. So in your novel, Lizette is really torn between her new direction and the obligation that she kind of feels towards her family, that she almost lets the internship in California just slip through her fingers. So how can college students, particularly first-generation students, negotiate that conflict that they feel between pursuing their new dreams and paths and passions, and then also answering the call of duty that they have towards their family?
Yeah, it's such a hard place to be. I mean, I've been there. I was there all the time in college, and then later, and even now in my life, like the job that I have is in Nebraska. My parents were mad when I took it. They were like, why can't you just get a professor job here in Miami? And I was like, because they're impossible to find. And I won't be as productive here because you guys are always bothering me. Like, and bothering me is the wrong word, but like, I have a lot of cousins, and they all have babies, and there's baby showers, and there's birthday parties, and you have to go to those things. There's a sense of obligation. But I think of it as like, well, I'm outside the radius of obligation. Like, I send a card, I send a present, but I'm not going to fly home every time somebody loses a tooth. Like, I just can't do that. And they understand that. They're like, yeah, it's expensive. Why would you come home for that? So part of it was like that distance that I built into my life allows me to be productive in my writing life. But I mean, I made bad choices all the time in college, and it still came out okay ultimately. But the bad choices I'm talking about is like, I turned down things. I turned down good opportunities in the summer because I had a boyfriend back home and wanted to go be near him, and that wouldn't let me do that. And like, where's that guy now? I have no freaking idea. Where is that guy? So if I tell myself now, like, hey, Jeanine, look at the long game, right? But that Jeanine was like, yeah, the long game is I'm gonna end up married to this person and he means a lot to me. Like, I couldn't see it.
Right.
So I don't have an answer for that except that the harder choice is usually the right one. I mean, not always if it's making you like scared, but you should follow the thing that's scary. And there was another, then by the time I was a junior, like you, I was a rising, I think you said you were a rising junior?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as a rising junior, I got the opportunity to do like a summer abroad. But by that point, it was another dude, and he was like, don't go, hang out this summer. And I was like, no, I'm gonna learn from last summer, and I'm gonna take this opportunity, and I'm gonna go. And so I got to like live in Italy for 6 weeks and take a writing class that changed what I wrote about. And like maybe that relationship would have been something else if I had stayed, but like ultimately that was the right choice. And we ended up like breaking over something really dumb. And can you imagine if I hadn't gone, I would be like regretting it. So I think it's about thinking, but I think a lot of times for me in college and for a lot of students, it's always that pull of family is like, when a person really cares about you, they want the best thing for you, but they don't always know what the best thing for you is. And I think for my family, in their mind, the best thing for me is if I lived like next door or maybe 2 houses down, and we had dinner together every night. I would come over, they would cook for me. Why would, that's the best thing. But I just kind of know that that's not the best thing for me. That's their idea of the best thing for me. And so again, that's part of the challenge of the first generation college student is you have to hold those two things in your mind. You have to realize that your family wants, when they say they want the best for you, it doesn't necessarily line up with what you know is the best for you. And so your job is making them still feel important and valid in your life while still pursuing the things you need to pursue to give yourself the most opportunities down the line.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's hard. And I made a ton of mistakes and made wrong choices all the time.
That's part of what makes you who you are, your mistakes are just kind of written into you. But okay, so kind of going off of that sense of pulling away from home, throughout your novel you use words such as loyalty, betrayal, and traitor when you're discussing the relationship between Lizette and her family. So in context, the words are really present when boundaries are being tested and the nature of the relationship is changing. How do you use this intentional word choice to illustrate Lizette's relationship with her family? And furthermore, what impact are you intending to have by using those specific words?
Oh. Are you an English major?
I'm not.
I think a double major is in your future because at word choice, I don't, as a writer in the process of creating these moments, you're like, you're finding just the word that feels correct. And then in retrospect and in revision, and the revision process is when you're like fine tuning every sentence and making sure every word is doing the most amount of work. Ultimately, I think this is a question for other people, right? For readers. I know what I intended, but it's less important what I intended than what the reader took from it. And what I can say for myself is words like betrayal and traitor and loyalty. I think for me, those words evoke in the Cuban American community a sort of harkening back to the Cuban Revolution and how many people left the island and they considered people who stayed behind a kind of betrayal or traitor, but then the people who also left were considered traitors or not loyal. So I know I wanted the stakes to feel really high, and how much this wasn't like, oh, this hurt my feelings. This was like the family was seeing this as like a catastrophic shift.
Yeah.
That in a lot of ways was using the same language that was evoked when people were leaving the island and during the Cuban Revolution and those subsequent years, maybe decade of time where people were making choices to leave things behind and immigrate to the United States. And that different people were labeled different things at that time, even if they were making a decision that they thought was the best for their family, was still seen as a bad thing. So I wanted to show how, and also because the whole line, there's also the plot of the novel dealing with Ariel Hernandez, which is a fictionalized version of Alien Gonzalez, like, because that's all there as well, those words needed to get used so that it starts to tie into thematically what is coming, right? So the reader sort of getting a subconscious subtext, right? The subtext of like, whoa, the stakes are really high, and we're talking about like loyalty and what is betrayal and what are those kinds of themes, and then they come up in a much more pronounced national scale later on in the book.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I had no idea about that kind of history. So kind of going off that and talking about culture. So the concept of cultural humility, are you familiar with it?
Tell me about it.
So on paper, it's basically focusing on your self-humility and growth rather than achieving a specific state of knowledge or awareness about a culture or belief system. So really thinking in terms of always growing and always being more aware of yourself and other cultures, instead of thinking of culture in terms of, I learned this today, check, check, check.
Oh, nice. I like this. Okay. Yeah.
So one of the recurring themes of your novel deals with Lizette struggling with cultural humility, specifically learning to accept herself and her role within Latinx community. Mm-hmm. So how is that personal growth within cultural humility? How is your personal growth really? Has it changed from being an undergraduate student to your current state of awareness as a professional, a writer, and even in your home life?
Oh man, these questions are, I was told this was not, I should have studied. It's a fantastic question. I think the only way I can answer it right now, which is in a way demonstrating cultural humility, right? Mm-hmm. That I have learned to become much more comfortable saying I don't know about things, and especially I teach a Cuban American literature class here at the University of Nebraska, and oftentimes I will be asked by students questions that I shouldn't answer. They'll say, do all Cubans hate Fidel Castro? And I'm like, I'm one person who has one opinion. So I say, I don't know, even though there's this temptation as a professor, right, in a position of authority to say, well, some Cubans feel this way and some feel this way, and it's much more complicated than history, which is a fine answer. Mm-hmm. And that's part of where the answer will lead. But part of my job is to admit, I can't know everything about an entire group of people, even as a member of that group. So I will sometimes what I've learned to do is ask a lot more questions of why is that question coming to me? So, I'll respond well, are all Nebraskan ranchers, do all Nebraskans love corn? Mm-hmm. And they'll be like, that's ridiculous. And so yeah. I can't answer that question. Why? That's so silly that you asked me that. So I think as far as how I've progressed from undergrad, I remember taking courses in fields of study that I had really no clue about. And that was really what dictated what I did. I ended up double majoring in women, gender, and sexuality studies because I felt like I didn't know a lot about feminism, and I had been taught that it was a bad word. And then learning there, I was like, wait, it's really just about equality between the sexes. So wait, let me learn more. And I ended up taking so many classes that it was a double major. And I also took a lot of classes in Africana Studies programs. But there was, I'll admit, after taking those classes, I was like, I know everything now, and I'm super woke, and I can talk to anybody about anything. Yeah. And the more time passes, and the more I read, I realize how far we all have to go, and that I have to go to actually, the most woke thing you can say is that you will never be fully woke.
Yes. Wow. That touched me. I like that one.
I think I walk around just sort of being I don't, Chekhov says this, it's admit you know nothing of the world and then just write. And so when I approach the page to write, I don't even think about like, well, what message do I want to get across? I'm like, no, I just need to ask the right questions and let people come to the page and make their own judgments about what I've written, and not judging it as good or bad, saying, what do I think about the people on this page? Yeah, does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like this phrase. So here's another example. Like, I'm gonna go right after this and like Google cultural humility and read all about it, and then make a list of all the new questions I have about it. But know that the more I learn about it, the more I'll see what I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, there's a really great TED Talk about cultural humility. It's really worth watching if you want to look it up.
I will.
So yes, I'm gonna move on to the next question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So, sorry, just a second. Let me get myself together. Okay. So, this is questions from our English department now. So, on a recent trip to Ellis Island, an Elon summer study instructor came across this nativist sentiment from 1854, which read, "America can only be America by keeping it American." So, are you American, or are your parents American?
My parents like got their citizenship when I was like in 8th or 9th grade, and I was born in the United States, so I guess.
Yeah. So how would you really kind of define being American, you know?
Again, I think the novel was my attempt to answer that question, and I'm actually also working on like a series of essays about what does it mean to be American. I don't know, man. I don't know, what is it? I think it means that you're part of a history of oppression. I think that's a easy answer to it. Like, it's not that it's easy, but you get what I mean. Like, clearly, if you're American, you live in a nation built on the backs of slaves, and that's the #1 quality to the American situation.
Absolutely.
But aside from that, and the more sort of like esoteric, like what does it mean to be American? I think my definition has changed with every place I've lived. When I lived in Los Angeles, my sense of being American was sort of defined a lot by film and like movies and Hollywood, and it's like, whoa, we're the place where so much international culture originates, right? Like Los Angeles exports culture everywhere. Like, I remember this was around when that show Mad Men was on, and there would always be these like shots of bars that are supposed to be in New York, but they were all LA bars. And I was like, LA is a giant lie. It's beautiful, and that's how I feel about America. It's a giant, beautiful lie. I don't know. Like, I don't want to say, but I mean, I was raised to feel very grateful to the United States, because it was a place that gave my family asylum and shelter, and that it was the greatest country in the world because you can come here with nothing and become something. But that's not really true. Some people can do that. Very light-skinned people, people with money, people with other kinds of privileges like education. I think a lot of times my family, in talking about, how much opportunity has been given to them by the United States, one of those big things is just the ability to become a citizen. If you're with like the recent, I think it's now, I don't know what the new president is going to do, but like with wet foot, dry foot, if a Cuban reached shore, they could apply for political asylum and become a legitimate resident. But if the other person on the boat was from Haiti, the person from Haiti got sent back, even though they had made the same journey and were likely coming for the same reasons, right? So these are the kinds of questions that really complicate my idea of America. And that I was sort of told one narrative growing up, but then would see things like, well, my parents were able to start a business in large part because of like government programs that afforded them that business and gave them chances at contracts for electricians, like chances at contracts at white-owned businesses, which were thriving already. It was like, oh, well, let's give these other newer people a chance. And if those programs went away, then America's a giant dumpster fire for my family, right? Like, which is what it feels like right now, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, I feel
Yeah, so you spoke a little bit about kind of a transition almost from being in one country and trying to transition into being a citizen of America, of the United States. So in your experience, is being a citizen of the United States, is that an identity that a lot of immigrants desire?
I can't speak for other immigrants. I don't know. I know my parents, they resisted becoming American citizens because there was still this hope that they would go back to Cuba and invest in that nation, like cultural capital, right? Like go back and rebuild it. It was they were very sad, I think, when they decided to become citizens, because it was sort of admitting that something wasn't going to happen within the lifetime of their most energy, right? Like they could go back now, but they're in their 50s, late 50s, you know what I mean? So it's not the same as if,
Right.
you know, they were going back in their 20s or 30s where they'd have sort of what they felt was more energy to do that. But yeah, I can't speak for like, is that a desired quality? I think it's deeply personal and deeply individual. So I mean, every person, it so much depends on the kind of life they've had and the sort of interactions they've had in this country.
Yeah.
To know that.
And also from your experience, your parents becoming citizens, what does that really mean for you, yourself, as your family, on an individual level? How does that kind of impact your narrative, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I totally understand the question. Like,
yeah, so what does it mean for you to, especially because your parents were resisting becoming American citizens of the United States? How does that kind of change your family's narrative, because they had to they wanted to resist, but then they ended up ultimately making the decision to come to the United States? How does that kind of shape you guys' family?
Yeah, I think for them it was less about becoming American, and then it was about no longer being Cuban, right? And for them it was all tied up in this idea. They'd grown up hearing stories and hoping to go back. Like they came over. My dad was like a young teenager, and my mom was like a kid. She was like 8, something like that. So there was always this narrative of, we're gonna go back home, and home is Cuba. And it's changing your story to say, like, well, now I'm gonna have my citizenship here, and this will be home, and I'll have an American passport. It's relinquishing some sense, not just a homeland, but easy access to a homeland, which then really, ironically,
did I disappear?
Yeah, you did, but I can
what's happening? Okay, as long as you can hear me, I think we're okay.
Yeah, well, ironically, they probably have easier access to Cuba as Americans than they do as Cubans.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's when laws start to get cloudy, and they don't necessarily work for individual people. You know, they might make sense on paper, but I don't know. I think for them, they're very grateful to this country. And I know when they became American, they saw it as a process. Like my dad tried to get really into NASCAR because he said, well, I'm American, so that's NASCAR. And he bought like cowboy boots. And he's like, okay. And they bought like a lot of Garth Brooks albums. Yeah. So they were like, okay, to be American, you have to like Garth Brooks, you have to be a cowboy, you have to like NASCAR. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. Like we can do this. And it's weird and they've never really left Miami. So their idea of what American is coming from, I don't know what they're watching, but it has Garth Brooks, NASCAR, and cowboy boots, right? And this was years ago too. This was a couple decades ago now at this point. Yeah. So I don't know, but I think it meant, as far as my family's narrative, like now it's time to construct something new. It's time to sort of be in charge of a story. And I think that's part of the American ethos, right? The idea that we're in control of our story, which is, it's not true, and I don't necessarily agree with. I think we're also very much tied to the legacy of oppression as a nation, and that sense of like, oh, you can be your own person. That is a direct effort to forget the true legacy of America's founding.
Right. Yeah. So, how does your work respond to or even inform the current American political climate? So, for instance, debating around issues of immigration and border and citizenship legality, or issues of access to public goods, including education. What is that like for you?
You know, it's weird. I wrote this book. The process of writing the book now is like a few years ago, right? Because once a book gets picked up, it's like still about a year and a half till it comes out, and then it comes out in hardcover and then paperback. So I couldn't have anticipated the current political situation. As I was working on this book, Barack Obama was president. We didn't even have the DREAM Act yet. Like, that hadn't even happened. So there are scenes in the book where Lizette is talking to a student whose parents are undocumented. Like, a lot of that becomes like it's changing by the minute, really. So my answer as a novelist is that my book is just one woman's story. It's one person's story. It's a real life. I mean, it's a novel, but I think of, you think of your characters as real people when you spend so much time working on them. But it's showing how these big things that we fight about and argue about and we try to make sense of on a legal and national perspective come down to impacting things like, can my parents come to graduation? Can they get on an airplane? Yeah. And how do I, we've had people apply for jobs here in Nebraska who don't have papers, and we have to figure out how to get them in here without flying. Like, they have to take trains I wanted to write a novel that just told one story that showed how these larger questions about immigration impact an individual life. And everybody hopefully has gotten to the end of the book, right, when they come to campus. And I didn't realize that I was really writing a political novel until that last scene, where every experience of the last year and a half comes to bear on one moment of who she's going to vote for. And you've just spent all these pages with someone, and you're like, how do you boil down everything she's experienced into one choice? Right. But that's what we do every day and every election cycle. And we can't, the idea of like a one-issue voter, you see how damaging that can be. I think we're seeing that now about how out of control things can get when that's what guides people. So I don't know how does my novel speak to those current things? That's for you guys to talk about in your small groups, because there's no way I could have anticipated it, right? The novel feeds all that, but I think by trying to be really honest about details and what that lived experience feels like for Lizette, I somehow managed to write a book that is really speaking to our current political moment. So kind of like I can tell the future.
Yeah. So you just said it's a great conversation for us to have as Elon students. So what kind of conversations do you wish that universities like Elon, or which is very, very similar to the fictional Rawlings, how do you want these conversations to kind of happen, and what do you wish that they would look like?
Oh, I don't know. Every campus has its own dilemmas, right, and its own issues. I think the one thing I'll say about it is, in having visited other campuses and seeing even on our own campus and other places that I've worked, and there's a big difference between solving a problem and looking like we're solving a problem. And certain solutions make really nice website fodder, and they look really good in press releases, and they do nothing on the ground of the campus. They do not change the day-to-day life of students in any tangible way.
Absolutely.
And those are the programs that I think look pretty and that schools will throw a lot of money toward. So I don't know, the specifics for Elon. I'll know more once I'm there and I can hang out with you guys. But what I've noticed over and over again on campuses is that there's two very different experiences. There's a predominantly white campus that's having a certain experience where a student can go through their entire time without having their political or cultural ideas challenged in any way. And then there's students of color that are living a very different experience on that campus, where even if it's not necessarily terrorizing or aggressive, it's this idea of consistently feeling marginalized on the classroom level, just because when you look around, you're the only person in the class, or you're one of two people in the class. And those can't be the same. And the goal should not be, well, how do we help the students of color have a white experience? The question should be, how do we eliminate a white experience on our campus? And the first step for that is admit there's a white experience on your campus. And people get really uncomfortable when we start talking about whiteness, but that's the first step. And it's an indication that something needs to change if you can't face that. I think we're very afraid as college faculty and administrators of programs that we want programs to talk about diversity, right? And that they everyone can get exposure to this writer. So, if you're saying your students of color are sort of having an experience at their campus that's here, and your white students are having an experience that's here, it's just a tangibly better experience at the campus. we're all very comfortable with programs that do this, right? But everyone gets a little uncomfortable when we talk about programs that do this and bring the experience of people of color to be equal, because that's admitting that there's white privilege, and that's admitting that that is not that's not the way it should be or the way it is. That is a condition of history, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
So I think they're difficult conversations to have on a campus. I think they're the kinds of questions that are tough for first year students to navigate, because you're adjusting in all these other ways. In some ways, it's when you're the most open and that those ideas are the most accessible to you. If you can start there, I think what happens for Lizette in the novel in a lot of ways is the experiences that and the insights that she comes to in that first year would likely have happened over 4 years had everything at home not been going on the way it was, had she not been in a pressure cooker of political activity back home, and then noticing all these things on her campus that I think she would have felt uncomfortable, but not really understood, or maybe internalized it and been like, oh, I guess it's just me, I'm overreacting, or no, they didn't mean anything bad by that. Like, it would have taken her 4 years to get as angry as she get and as aware as she gets. But instead she has this whole thing. So I think Elon is already making a good step by bringing a book that has these issues at its forefront and handing it to students and saying, here, let's talk about the things that happen to students on campus, and what is the experience that you're likely going to have, and how do we make sure it's as equitable for all of us here on our campus. So I'm already excited to visit for those reasons. When the school picks up this book, they're saying we're not afraid of these questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. So earlier in our conversation, we talked about how at the end of the novel, Lizette faces a really big choice with who she's going to vote for, and how it kind of just wraps everything all together. So at the end, you write a little bit about how you borrowed from your own experiences to create this character of Lizette. But Lizette, she chooses a career in science, whereas you chose the creative arts. And based on your own experiences as a student and as your experiences teaching first-generation college students, how are these choices different between pursuing different paths to kind of go forward with your career?
Yeah, I think there's a narrative that gets told. I think it's a very white middle-class narrative of like, you have to follow your dream and you have to be what you want and you can do anything you want. And I didn't really get that narrative told to me. And I think because my parents were, working class, low-income family, Latino parents, they were like, you should be a doctor. You should be a doctor, because that would be great. And I've said this before, but it was like there were 4 jobs. It was like doctor, lawyer, engineer, astronaut. And now there's not even astronaut. Like there's no space program, right? But their ideas that there was value in those kinds of jobs, that because I think they were tangible jobs. They were like, you will go and you will get shots, and you will like write prescriptions. Whereas like, what does a writer do? Like, you sit around all day and you're like, I'm having thoughts. I'm gonna write them down. I'm gonna look at them again and think them. Like, it's a very strange job, and it feels a lot like a luxury to my family. They still don't think of what I do as work. So I think that's a particular pressure and it's not necessarily tied to students of color. I think that's much more class-based in that I know my family saw college as a way to get a good job, and that's not what college should be. College is a place where you learn how to think, and you learn what you think about things, and then you challenge those thoughts. College is a place where you become a better citizen and a better human being. And if you've chosen to go to a large college, you sort of already believe that about what college is. And that was not something like I went to college thinking, like I did actually major in biology for a little while. And then what I found was like, I had no passion for it. I was fine, like I did fine, but I had no passion for it. And I hated the classes, and I didn't go to them sometimes. And, I'd do fine on the test, but I didn't care. And I found myself stealing time from studying for bio to do my English courses and to read these novels and to write stories. And I thought, well, you know what? If I don't care about what I do, I'm not going to make it as a doctor, because I won't care. And I'll end up doing something else that uses that degree, but I won't be like happy. But the idea of following something for happiness and for a sense of passion is a concept that was completely denied to my parents, who got here and were like, time to work, right? Let's work. Like, my dad was not like, passionate about being an electrician. Like he just had an aptitude for it. He found work, he could apprentice with somebody, and he was able to take the test to get the licenses. But like my dad should have been an astronaut. He has a really good memory. He like now he's an electrical inspector, and he when he like is going places and seeing stuff, he's like on page 48 of the code, paragraph 5. This is like he has that kind of photographic memory for things. Like what a waste! I mean, it's not a waste. He's a good inspector. Somebody with that kind of brain, like you want them working on like something really like something I don't want to do, right? Like something that like requires that kind of skill and attention, and being an inspector does. But he's come to that job years and years, like decades after working as an electrician, where that skill set wasn't used. Like we didn't take advantage of what he had to offer as a society, right? So I think I've totally lost track of the question at this point. I guess what I'm saying is like what is important for me in the novel is that Lizette discovers she has a passion for science, and that the passion lines up with aptitude. So not only does she care, but she's good at it. She has a natural inclination to it. And that those two things put together are absolutely you should major in. And so as first year students arriving on campus, you want to start thinking about what are the classes that you don't dread? What are the classes that feel more like a club? When you go to them, you're like, oh man, I don't even think of this as a class. I'm just enjoying myself. And imagine that the rest of your life could look like that most of the time. Yeah. Why wouldn't you follow that? And that was, like I said, I think that's a message as a first generation college student that you don't get. This like you have all this pressure of like performing and making good money when you leave college and doing something that impresses people, and you just I mean, fuck that. You can't do that. You can't live like that.
Yeah. So you've already touched on this a little bit, but are the rewards and obstacles different for first generation college students and for any other student in a society that seems really intent upon seeing higher education as quote unquote practical and synonymous with career preparation? So do you think that going down a path in the arts, is that seen as impractical? And especially as a first generation student, how did that kind of shape you, and the feedback that you kind of got from that choice? How did that really influence your passion?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I sort of touched on the answers to that. It does, it feels impractical. I would say as a first generation college student, it still feels impractical. Like I still can't believe that, like when I look at my calendar for the day, like there's 2 hours that say write. I can hear how that sounds to other people, and they're like, you just sit around and write, and like, what's hard work? But yeah, it's work that doesn't have an immediate result, right? It doesn't, and I wouldn't get to do that way if I wasn't a professor, right? So like for my particular family, the work as a professor legitimizes the writing career. So it's like I have this job that values my writing with money, and so therefore it's valid. It's like super capitalist, right? Like, but yeah, like the challenges for first generation college students is you're probably coming from a low-income family, you might be leaving college from a low. So you're like, well, I got to get a good job. And the way that I handled that was I actually also applied to law schools when I did MFA programs, and I applied to like 15 MFA programs and 3 law schools. And basically, again, it was sort of money. When I came back to my parents, it was like, well, I can go to this law school and it costs all these thousands of dollars. Or I can go to this MFA program that's giving me a scholarship and a fellowship and a stipend. So I'll be a TA, but I'll make money there and I won't come out in any more debt. And they were like, well, duh, go for the writing career. And like they didn't know what they were telling me, right? They were like, this one's good. And when they would ask me to tell people, like when people would ask, what's your daughter doing? They said, oh, she's teaching at a university in the Midwest. She's at the University of Minnesota teaching. It's like, no, I was getting my grad degree. But that was like, they didn't know why I wanted more school after having gone to school. Right. So part of it is just that they don't understand necessarily what you're doing. And even when they do understand, it can feel very like, what's the promise at the end? And the truth is there's no promise. Like I could have finished my MFA and been just like I was like, now what do I do? And I want to work at a daycare. And then I worked at a movie theater. And the point was I was writing and I was happy and I paid my bills with this other job. That's tremendously terrifying to anyone, but especially for college students, because you're like, I did all this. And this is the same freaking job I could have had if I never left home. It can feel that way. But the answer is like if you're passionate about something and you have the aptitude for it, you just have to believe that the promise of that will materialize a decade down the road.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so we're running a little bit low on time, so this is going to be the last question. Okay. But So some editors and writers have suggested that reading fiction is frivolous and irresponsible in a world facing urgent. So basically, explain the value of reading fiction when there are so many pressing facts going on in the world that demand our attention, between whether we're looking at after 9/11, reading only history books and books about Islam because you are worried and want to kind of confront the stereotypes that you are being fed by society. So that's just kind of one example, but I just would like to hear your take on what you think.
So I have an answer for this, because there's also a ton of research showing that novels are the fastest way to teach and instill empathy in a human being. And there's a reason for that, because I can read a ton of history books, I can read a ton of facts about a situation and be really engaged in that. But I won't necessarily know what it was like to have lived in that time until you find the narrative, the well-researched novel that explains what it was like to be someone in that time. In a way, just the tools available to the fiction writer are not the tools available to the historian the same way. So you could have read a whole book about immigration policies and what happened during Elian Gonzalez, or the whole Elian Gonzalez thing, and it wouldn't feel like you lived through it because you didn't live through it. But when you read Lizette's story, you lived through it with her.
Yeah.
And it is just as real. I'm not saying she's a real person, but there's a version of reality where that person existed and you followed it. And I know that because I did the research and I did the homework mentally of making sure that experience felt as real as possible. So only through fiction are you creating, as a fiction writer, an experience that a reader enters into and experiences along with the character, and therefore my job is to create and shape that sensory experience that then inspires or triggers empathy and compassion in the reader.
Absolutely.
So not only is it not frivolous, it's essential. It's like, and think about this too, 100 years from now, think about 100 years ago, what are the things we're reading and teaching and studying? History books get rewritten and updated all the time. We're still reading those things. You're gonna get more of a sense of what it was like to be like an old school British person from a Jane Austen novel than you are from tons of different journal entries and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just a compressed version of the experience that inspires empathy and compassion in you. So I would say before, like for your example of reading all these history books about, Islam, you also want to be reading contemporary writers who identify as Muslim and see what their experience is like, what those protagonists are experiencing either in the United States or abroad. Like that is just as vital an experience to have. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of fiction as a way. I mean, one of my freshman common reads was like Guns, Germs, and Steel, which was the nonfiction book by Jared Diamond. Fantastic book, lots of footnotes, lots of information. I don't remember it. I remember reading it and feeling accomplished, but I don't remember it. But the next year's common read was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and I learned so much about the sense of being othered, and we talked about like genetics, and we talked about ethics and the responsibility of creatorship, and I remember scenes from that novel as if I had lived them. We remember in scene, we don't remember in summary. So part of what fiction is doing is calling on what our brains are good at doing, which is putting us somewhere so we can feel something and then remember it.
Absolutely. That was awesome. Oh, we did!